All right, people. So I'm still going down this hill. I'm still going down this hill about buying versus renting. Because in my last video, some of y'all got on my ass talking about, Ray, you need to start making a video about uh renting is better than buying and blah blah blah. Buying is always better. And then some people was with me on the situation. So I decided to dig a little deeper on the property and the seller and the information that the seller gave me and cross-check that with some actual facts that we got from the lender and a bunch of other different paperwork so I can give the logical and data-driven explanation of this property so you can make your own decision. Now, the property was purchased back in like 2015 or something. I thought it was purchased at 15,000, but apparently it was purchased at actually 23,000. Now, how did he get it that cheap? REO. Basically, the bank owned it and he paid cash for the property 2015 for like an 850 square foot home. 23,000, cheap as hell. Now 2021 come around, and around that time during the COVID time, interest rates were super low. So everybody was buying like crazy because rates was low, or either people was refinancing if they had a fixed loan so they can get a lower interest rate. And so he ended up refinancing around like 2021ish for like 3.8 something interest rate for 30 years. And I think he refied for like 210,000, which puts the value of the property at like 260 or something like that, assuming that it was 80% LTV at the time. And for those who don't know, 80% LTV, basically, I'm just keep it simple. Whatever the property appraised at that moment, the lender or the bank or whoever was giving him 80% of that value at that time for the property when he go to refinance it. Now, one of the things, let's get into the math on the front face of that. Let's see what his ROI is from when he put 23,000 cash to pay for it to the point where the house reappraised for the value and he pulled out the capital. So I gotta pull out the handy dandy notebook so I can run the numbers with you guys. So he refinanced at about 210,000, and after closing costs and all this stuff, it left him with somewhere around about 187,000. Okay, so 187,000, and then we're gonna subtract the 23K that he originally bought the property for. And then we're going to divide that by the 23K that he put in because this is the money invested. And this formula is ROI formula, right? So when you do the math on that, you're coming out to like some 7.13-ish, something like that. And so when you multiply it by 100, that's going to give you an ROI of about 713% over a 10-year period. Now, 713% ROI, that's absolutely stupid, right? That's a big ROI. 10 years. The dude's winning, right? Wrong. Because that money he got, it isn't profit. It's not profit. It's debt. You're getting debt from the bank. But it's a 713% ROI, which is still crazy, whether it be debt or whether it be actual cash that you get to take and you don't have to pay back. And you see, this is the funny thing, because on the front face, I got the 713 because I paid 23,000 and I get the refinance and I get to pull out all this cash, but I still have to pay it back. But I can change up the way that I announce this or present this for marketing purposes to make it look like a good deal. And this is what the banks do. The banks are going to make you think it's a good deal, but it's debt. It's not actually income. Now, some more inside story is other fancy people is going to be like, hey, that's still good money. I could take that money and put it into this property. I can go buy me another one. Cash flow. That's not what most traditional household consumer buyers do. That's not what they do. They're going to stay in the property, which is exactly what this guy did. He pulled out the money. No telling what he did with it. Maybe he paid off some debt. Maybe he had some other family situation, some other emergency. You never know. He pulled out that debt. He didn't put it back into the house. He didn't rent the house. Him and his wife were staying in it. And then eventually they went out and bought another house. Why he still had this house? He didn't sell it. He tried to sell it, but it never sold. It was on market for almost 3 months trying to sell this property. One, it's super small. Two, didn't upkeep it. So now we get to October 2025, the month of today, whatever, this month. And the property currently looks like this. And like this. Mosquito. And like this. Absolute shit. With looking at those pictures and looking at the market and looking at the comps that you see here. I'm going to put up some of the comps. You can kind of scroll through and see whatever. So we're looking at those numbers and kind of doing some math, wiggling around because the property condition is not what those other properties look like. Because if you look at this property, you see that this property is well upkept. It looked like it was just renovated, at least to livable standards. The value of this home is anywhere between 100 and 120,000. Now, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say the house value is 120,000. And one more thing to keep in mind, he bought this property cheap. He was able to refinance it because the value ended up in the 200s. And right now he owes about 120 something thousand on the property as far as the loan goes. So when I did the math, it should have been around 190 if he kept the same principal, but it looks like he's been paying more on the property, right? So he owes about 120 something. Now we're going to slide back over to the handy dandy notebook.
So check this out. We're going to do this all the way from the beginning. So if we have, initially he started with $0, right? And we're looking at this from a balance statement perspective. A balance statement perspective. This is what we're looking at this like. Balance your books. This is old school. He started with $0. He bought the property. He's negative $23,000. The value increase, right? He had a value increase in the property to about $265,000. That's the value he went up. So that property value ended up going up from the time he bought it about $242K. But he only gets to access $210,000. Now, mind you, at 2021, that was the current market value, the market equity. And I say market equity because that property had both intrinsic and extrinsic value that allowed that property value to go up. Know the difference between in and extrinsic value and subjective value, because a lot of people want to tie property's value to their subjective reasoning when it doesn't apply to what they physically done to it internally and how the market affected externally. And so now we look at the money he's got out. He has a negative 23, and then he goes to refi, and he ends up pulling another 187. That puts him at that 210. Now, you see how these two numbers line up? It didn't happen by accident, okay? Now, he still got that loan from the refi at 210K. So far, he's paid about 90K toward that balance, which is why he's sitting around like the 120 mark, right, of what he owes. That's from 2021 up until 2025. And he owes, that's still, he's out of pocket, still negative 120. That's his current balance right now. The current balance on the property, the value of his property is sitting at about 120K. And we do the math on that, where's he sitting at? He's at zero. He didn't lose any money, he didn't gain any money, he barely broke even. Now, in this case, he could potentially go negative, depending on how he offset taxes, depending on what other expenses or things that he had to pay for after he already spent the refinance monies whenever he got from the property. And so you see his value, or the money he ended up with in 2025 would be zero, assuming that he was to sell that property right now for 120 and somebody bought it. He would end up breaking even at zero. Mind you, I have not talked about the IRS. The biggest thing here, the IRS, because in the IRS, they're not going to tax you because you pulled out that refi. No, that's a debt. But what they will tax you on is they're going to realize that this property was a capital gain and he bought it at $23,000 and he was able to refi it and get $210,000. They're going to tax him on this amount, and Uncle Sam is going to come for that money because they see that as a capital gain event and they're going to tax that. I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax person, but I'm sure IRS going to be like, oh no, you made some money on this property. We need ours, buddy. I'm going to need you to run me your pockets. So he could be potentially negative.
So when we go through these numbers, I just broke down the numbers to you. Tell me I'm lying. Prove to me that I'm lying. Make a video and prove to me that I'm lying about the numbers. This is the exact situation that's happened with this guy property. And somebody's going to come over here and be like, oh, that's not right. That doesn't make sense. Motherfucker, that's the numbers. That's the numbers that the guy gave me, that we verified with the mortgage company, that we verified with how much money he got to owe. So how you going to tell me that that's wrong? Get out your feelings. And so I will point out again. One, basically the seller's fucked. Two, how is buying a house good again?